So Jamal, let me start with you. You think when we look at what we've heard from Trump over the past few days, it is a sign that his team, his core team that is working to get him elected, even though I know there are cracks within that team of, factions, but the group, that they're concerned. Why?
Yeah, it seems to me like something has changed in the milk, right? Like they've figured out that perhaps they've got to really poke the bear, get their people excited. If he's going to be a bomb thrower, he has to keep throwing bigger and bigger bombs so that people know that that is who he is. At the same time, you saw Lindsey Graham on Sunday come out and take out hard on Republicans who were voting for Kamala Harris. And he said, you can't do this. I don't understand why you're doing this. He was really worked up about it, kind of emotional. And then J.D. Vance, at the same time, goes after Liz Cheney hard and calls her, says that she's obsessed and hateful and petty and small, all kind of words I would never use if I was trying to get a woman to like me, but he chose to use them. So it seems to me like maybe this Liz Cheney, Kamala Harris tag team they have going on might be working in some fashion.
They're terrified of it. So we saw in the GOP primaries as many as 20% of voters turned out actively, high propensity voters, to vote against Donald Trump and cast votes for Nikki Haley. Even after she dropped out, they still turned out in Pennsylvania. So if even a fraction of those, even less than half of them, end up deciding they'll bite the bullet and vote for Kamala Harris, a Democrat for the first time, you're talking about significant margins of places that matter. And I just want to note that last week, Donald Trump was asked on Fox and Friends how he'd reach out to Nikki Haley voters. And he used the opportunity to insult Nikki Haley and talk about how he beat her so badly in the primary. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is embracing Liz Cheney wholeheartedly. Right. I think it's a strategy that works, and he can't bring himself to be the bigger person.
Oh, and interesting, and we're talking, that obviously impacts a whole group of voters, not just women voters, so I don't mean to imply that. I am curious, though, Aaron, your view on what we've heard in these past few days, whether it be the Arnold Palmer or the jokingly calling the podcast host, that was friendly territory, stupid, or the expletive vice president. Could there be any sort of a strategy in Trump doing all of this and speaking in this way?
Of course, there could be a strategy, and I'm sure the Trump campaign is trying to put forward a strategy, like Jason Miller said, for the president to put forward a closing argument. But instead, Donald Trump's going to do Donald Trump, and that's going to be whatever thought comes out of his mind at the moment it comes out of his mind, and he's going to say it to the American people. It's very baked in, though, into the polling. The American people at this point kind of shrug off all the bombasticness because it's a never-ending outrage cycle about him. But for Democrats right now, if they want to win this thing, they need to start paying attention to their messaging because it's contrasting right now, but not versus Trump. They're saying he is an unserious person, but what he says is very serious. Swing voters are going to say that doesn't make sense to me. And they're also going to say his policies are an issue, but in states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio, where you have competitive Senate races, you are seeing those candidates hold tight to Trump's policies and say, I supported these positions. Democrats have to find a closing argument that's better than I'm not Trump because they can't have it both ways with voters. It won't work.
Alyssa, what do you think about this point about the policy and the Senate candidates that are tying themselves? They're saying, okay, you can call him unserious. You can say that how he speaks is unserious, but what he's actually saying in his policies are serious.
Well, there's no question that the Biden administration was behind on addressing the border crisis, and there's this, prevalent issue of inflation and the economy that are the top issues for voters. And Kamala Harris is trying to navigate her way out of them, put together a forward-looking economic agenda. There was this Associated Press data that showed it may be breaking through. But I want to hit on one thing that Aaron said, which I think is really well taken. It's baked in what Donald Trump is going to say, but there is some wisdom and strategy to him just flooding the zone with crazy. Talking about the silly Arnold Palmer story means we're not talking about him saying he'd use the American military against U.S. citizens, which, by the way, I was in the Oval Office when, in front of Mark Milley and General Esper, Mark Milley and Mark Esper, he wanted to use the military against U.S. citizens. This is a real thing that happened in his last term, and he would absolutely do again.
And he wants different conversation. You mentioned the AP poll. Jamal, can I just ask you about that? Because this was, we would talk about there were two areas where Trump specifically significantly outpolled Harris, and that was immigration and the economy. All right, Alyssa mentioned this, so let's just go through the numbers. AP poll, Harris now leading by double digits on who voters trust more on middle-class taxes, and she's up 5 points on the issue of housing costs, which they had been doing a tit-for-tat of, frankly, specific policy, one of the few areas. Whether it was realistic on either side is a separate point. She's within the margin of error now on the cost of groceries and gas. Jamal, that's huge.
Yeah, it is. Now, I say this when the polls are bad, so I'm going to say it when the polls are good. This is just one poll. But if this direction is real, what we're seeing is Kamala Harris closing the gap on economic numbers. That is very significant. Because if she's moving toward Donald Trump and either tying him or getting a little ahead, plus you add in abortion and you add in democracy, which is the key points that some of her voters are saying they want to vote on those issues. If that happens, you start to lose a path for Donald Trump on Election Day to get people to want to vote for him. What is the argument if they think Kamala Harris is as good as he is on the economy, and we don't have to have foolishness on TV every night when our kids are in the kitchen while we're trying to make dinner?
So, and it is different groups. I mean, Aaron, on the economy, Trump's clearly noticing it, right? He had originally been the one who brought up the idea of not taxing tip income when he was trying to win over Nevada voters. Recent swing state poll today, showed Nevada tied a dead heat 48-48. But he's been, trying to reach out on economic issues when he thinks it can move the needle. He clearly sees a problem there. I just want to play this exchange today that he had about eliminating federal income taxes.
Do you think it's possible to find a way to eliminate federal taxes?
There is a way. There is a way.
No tax on Social Security benefits for our seniors. No tax on overtime.
We will make interest on car loans fully deductible.
We will have no tax on tips.
Okay, Aaron, obviously those are big promises. A lot of people like what they hear on that. It's all completely unreasonable to happen in a short time frame, if ever. Just that's the economic reality. Some of them, though, could. I mean, does Trump mean what he says here, or is this now just, I'm going to give a laundry list of every single thing I can think of?
In this instance, there is a reality where some of these could definitely become law. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has a lot of provisions that are going to sunset and expire in 2025. Tax legislation is going to happen in the United States, and that could mean everything from income tax, sure. It could also mean the child tax credit. It could mean starting businesses. It can mean saving for your child's future. Things that we saw in the 2017 bill that will sunset. So yes, there are economic provisions here that could actually become law. Kamala Harris herself has obviously indicated that she's supportive of the no tax on tips as well. So the matter is, what do you want the economic policy and tax policy to look like in the United States? Because both of these people will have a real opportunity to do that in 2025.
Aaron, I will just say here, voters have a good sniffer on them, and they can smell BS. At some point, they know you can't eat chocolate and not work out and not get fat, right? At some point, you have got to figure out.
What, you can't just take the abs vibrator and have a beer on your couch?
Exactly. At some point, you got to get money into the government to pay for the things that we have. So if you're promising to take away all the taxes, how are we going to pay for our government?
Well, I mean, Alyssa, can I ask you one thing about what happened at McDonald's? You had Tim Walz on The View today, and I know you were talking about the McDonald's visit, At a fundraiser, he slammed Trump's visit by saying he looked as dumb as I thought he would, which, I mean, might not be, this is the same crassness of Trump, but, this is the discourse that we're hearing now. And he had an exchange with you about it, and I wanted to play it.
What do you say to these Americans who feel like they're struggling?
Yeah, well, if they're saying they are, they are. And I think for all of us of prices being out there, I think that's why Vice President Harris has made it very clear that that is a top priority. Vice President Harris and I grew up middle class. We understand that. She actually worked in a McDonald's. She didn't go and pander and disrespect McDonald's workers by standing there in your red tie and take a picture. His policies are the ones that undermine those very workers that were in that McDonald's.
Okay, the whole thing about the McDonald's and who worked at a McDonald's and who didn't, and fries don't get touched, thank God. Does this move voters, though? Is anybody moving on this?
Listen, I'm fascinated by this. Donald Trump used to be kind of the master of the OTR. He'd show up somewhere, shake hands with workers, but this was a pre-staged event where they had people who were supporters come through, and then he didn't have a policy proposal. He wasn't saying, oh, we're going to raise the minimum wage. So I think it fell flat unless you're somebody who's a meme bro who's already with him and liked the picture of it. But I do think where Harris Waltz are outperforming Biden is acknowledging that people are hurting. That was the struggle that Biden had. Is it was inflation is high, but listen, we feel that it may be getting better, but people are truly hurting, and we're here to show up and relate to those issues they're struggling with.
All right, Alyssa, Jamal, Aaron, thank you all.